The U.S. Surgeon General has called it an urgent public health crisis, a devastating decline in the mental health of kids across the country. According to the CDC, the rates of suicide, self-harm, anxiety, and depression are up among adolescents.
We don't have an environment where young people feel comfortable coming forward. Stigma plays a big part in this.
It's really scary.
It is.
Teens who spend more than 3 hours a day on social media face double the risk for mental health issues like depression and anxiety.
Is it too much for them to handle?
Well, it absolutely is. Social media feeds into this continual pressure that folks are under, and we need to acknowledge that and deal with it.
The youth mental health crisis has taken the country by storm. We're here with Dr. Jerome Adams to discuss it. Dr. Adams, let's first talk about academic pressure and stress that students are facing. Do you feel like these students, 20-something years old, is it too much for them to handle?
Well, it absolutely is. I mean, number one, the competition. I don't know if I'd get into the schools that I got into, nowadays, and as a father of 3 teenagers, I do worry about the academic pressure. So one of the things that we have to do is help parents understand the level of stress that these students are under, and then help them understand how to depressurize the situation in many cases, and then reassure young people that, hey, if you get a C, your life is not over. So I share my upbringing from a humble background. The fact that I never even thought I was going to go to college, and I go to medical school and become a surgeon general, because young people need to hear that. They need to hear stories of struggle. Michael Jordan famously said he's missed thousands of more shots than he's ever made, but people think he's the best basketball player of all time. Why? Because he used every failure, every missed shot as an opportunity to learn and grow, and then to ultimately succeed down the road. We need to share those stories very, very honestly with young people, because in too many cases they're on TikTok and they're on Twitter and they're on Instagram, and they think everybody's life is perfect and everyone got it right the first time, and when they don't, that they're a failure, including in the academic sense, when people are like, I got into Harvard, I got into Yale.
Right.
Well, that's not the reality for everyone. So I do think that is a big part of the problem in terms of pressure on our young people. But again, it's pressure to wear the right shoes, pressure to like the right music. Social media feeds into this continual pressure that folks are under, and we need to acknowledge that and deal with it.
We talked about it a little bit earlier about bullying, and these kids today, not only are you bullied behind the screen, but you're bullied now in front of the screen, right? You actually made a comment about you're actually taking the bully home with you. Can you get into that a little bit more in your terms in mind? How do you deal with it as a teenager?
Well, as a teenager, we have to give teenagers tools to recognize and to intervene. My daughter, actually, she's 14. She shared a video with me just this weekend that just blew my wife and I away. It was a video of a fight that happened at school, and someone's getting the crap beat out of them, and everyone's around with their cell phones.
Right. Nobody
They're not
helps
intervening.
anymore.
They're trying to get that clip so that they can post it online. So that's an area of bullying that you don't even think about, where folks aren't wanting to intervene. So as young people, we want them to recognize if you see something, say something, and be someone's advocate, be someone's ally when and where it makes sense, and certainly don't wait until you get the video shot before you intervene. But also just separating yourself from the phone, giving yourself a break. We're addicted to our phones.
Yeah.
We are. And for adults, but especially for young people, giving yourself a little bit of a break during the day, just like we tell people, this is how you quit cigarettes. You a little bit at a time. Instead of smoking 8 a day, smoke 7 a day. Instead of smoking 7 a day, try to get to 6 a day. And you slowly get to a point where you're no longer dependent on it. That's what we need to do with social media, so that you can create separation between you and that bully.
What's interesting is you mentioned about the videos of your daughter, what she just showed you, and you see it every day in the news in New York. Somebody falls into the subway system, or now all these people are getting pushed into the subways, and everyone's sitting there watching.
Yep.
And they're videoing, and no one's jumping in to actually help. Somebody does eventually, but it's really scary.
It is. I mean, and again, social media is a tool. We can use it to highlight good behavior, but in many cases, behind that camera is also highlighting the bad behavior that all of society is embracing.
Right, and I feel like it's the simple things like tell it to my face if you have a problem. Everybody's hiding behind the phones today. So even though people might feel connected, it also gives the bullies these opportunities to get away with more stuff than back in the day when they would do it face to face. I'm curious to know, what could we be doing to help the victims, but also to help the bullies, because the people bullied are the ones that usually have problems of their own.
I'm so glad you went there, because more broadly, the bullying in the incident, that's the symptom. That's not the root problem.
Right.
The root problem is that we have increasing mental health issues. We know that 1 in 5 young people have a mental health disorder occurring every year. Anxiety, depression, sometimes more severe mental health disorders. And when those are left unchecked, untreated, people either become bullies or they end up in situations where they're bullied. And so it works in both directions, because we don't have an environment where young people feel comfortable coming forward. Stigma plays a big part in this. And I love this podcast because this conversation is helping us lower stigma.
Yep.
One of the most important things I tell people is it's okay not to be okay. And I work with athletes, I work with musicians, again, using our collective platforms to normalize just talking about anxiety, depression, stress, and that it's okay not to be okay. But then we need to make sure once people identify themselves as having a problem, that there's help available.
Right.
And there's not nearly enough treatment available. So as a physician, I'm constantly working with providers and health systems to say, how can we make access to mental health services more available? How can we do, for instance, mental health first aid training for people in schools?
Yep.
So that teachers can recognize problems. I mean, they identify it as a behavior problem and don't even think to ask, okay, are you being abused at home?
We always say this all the time, like, they teach you physical fitness in school, but what about mental fitness? And people turn to bullying because they don't have their own skills to work
deal
on
with
themselves.
Well, what's interesting, and this is another side note, but they don't even teach physical fitness in schools anymore. They're taking out gym class, and why do I mention that? Well, I mention that because we know one of the predictors of whether or not you're going to have mental health problems is whether you're physically healthy or not. What you eat during the day. Nutrition can determine whether or not you're anxious or depressed. Physical activity, for me, that's actually my big release.
Yep.
When I'm stressed out, nothing makes me feel better than going out for a run and just breaking into a sweat and getting away from it all. But without gym class, those bullies have all this built up tension and they want to take it out on someone else. So your physical health actually is correlated with your mental health. And to your point, we're not getting enough of either in schools.
Dr. Adams, thank you for this incredible conversation today. We have learned so much. I know that I have. And for our people out there listening and watching, if you have any mental health questions or issues, drop us a line, drop us a question, or even subscribe. This is Misunderstood.